Property and Supply Committee meeting. This is a committee meeting of the Littlestown Area School Board Directors. This is a live in-person meeting taking place in public in accordance with the Sunshine Act. By attending and/or commenting publicly in this meeting, you are consenting to recording and to this future viewing versus meeting. Harry, please call the roll.
Jenny Ewan. Here. Brian Lawyer.
Here.
Nick Lovell.
Here.
Stephen Yerger.
Here. Please rise to the pledge of allegiance and number silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We now recognize members of the public who have signed up to provide a comment as stipulated in Policy 903. When your name is called, please approach the podium, state your name, confirm you are a resident or a taxpayer in the district, and the topic of discussion is presented. Please direct your comments to the board as a whole and not to an individual. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. This is a privilege to speak. The privilege to speak may be interrupted, revoked, or recessed, and a meeting may be called by the chair if the speaker does not observe reasonable decorum or orderly conduct. Thank you. Suzanne Johnson.
My name is Suzanne Johnson. My daughter attends school in the district, and I'm a taxpayer resident. In my public statement on November 5th and by email, I asked what happens in 2026 when the building project is complete and there's over $6 million to move out of the middle school, high school assigned fund. Will that go to paying down the district debt, or will that be moved into capital reserves for more infrastructure spending? As usual, I only get partial responses by email or no response at all. So when I asked the business manager further about this after the next meeting, he told me that that $6.1 million would be used as a lump sum payment for the project when it was completed, which would reduce the amount of money the district would have to borrow. However, as we see on the agenda tonight, I was exactly right in November when I asked if you were planning to move it to capital reserves. Maybe Ms. Johnson isn't full of this information. In 2023, you raised taxes 2.75% when you projected a budget deficit, when there was actually a $4.1 million budget surplus that you moved $2 million of into capital reserves. In 2024, you raised taxes 1% when you projected a budget deficit, but there was actually a $3.75 million budget surplus, surprise, surprise, and you moved almost all of that into capital reserves again. Now you're discussing moving, as I mentioned, that $6.1 million from the middle school, high school budget into capital reserves when the project is complete. Plus, there's $600,000 in a transportation assigned fund for new buses and vans, which you won't need because now you're talking about contracting out transportation services. Yet you still plan on raising taxes again this year. At least 1% for ACTI and looks like even more to hire a second security officer, which we don't need, and for other operational budget increases. It appears that you told us that there's going to be a budget deficit when you're creating a budget in order to justify raising taxes so that when there's a significant surplus, you can throw that into capital reserves to fund additional spending. If you stop loading capital reserves, that $6.7 million that we have left over for the middle school, high school building project and these new vehicles that we don't need to purchase, that should be more than enough funds to cover everything that we need this year, plus set aside money for our future obligations for ACTI without further increasing our tax burden. You added several central office FTEs last year. You proposed hiring a second officer this month, and you proposed, or last month, and you're proposing 1.5 additional FTEs tonight. One, fortunately, for a classroom teacher assistant, but also half of a FTE for administrative assistant. And you also talk about eliminating one FTE. I'm not sure whether that's in the classroom or not. When Superintendent Bigger was here, the goal was to achieve cost savings through the building consolidations by reducing FTEs. He projected a total of 7 FTEs in F20 and 23 and 24, and an additional 5 FTEs reductions in 25 and 26. But then Mr. Bigger left, and with our new superintendent and school board, FTEs are actually increasing, especially with district administration, the business office, and other administrative support, which seems counterintuitive when you have building consolidation and declining enrollment. Between the November 5th meeting and the November 11th work session, there was a dramatic shift in alignment of board member views about the athletic fields project, which seems improbable without exchanging opinions outside these public meetings. Unfortunately, I think that's how things are done here. You just got caught this time, despite the legal obligations and claims of transparency. Despite all that deliberation in the public meetings and outside public meetings, the administration brought the issue back on January 7th, and it's again on the agenda tonight, to increase the spending on that athletic fields project. Really? This board has continuously approved new spending measures, and then, with upcoming elections, you all feign surprise when faced with potential tax increases to cover the things I warned you about over and over. It is the school board's responsibility to hold the administration and each other accountable to improve student outcomes, improve fiscal responsibility, and increase transparency in our district, and you all have failed.
Thank you. Dwayne Sullivan.
Wayne Sullivan, resident taxpayer, voter. I just want to discuss tonight about these proposed tax increases. I know this is the time of year we start discussing this every year, formalities, but I just want to make the board aware of a couple things. As you all, I don't know, most of you are aware, Adams County had a huge tax increase in their rate. Not the municipal, but the actual Adams County rate. It went up 16%. So let me give you just a little bit of figure here. If your house is assessed at $211,400, which is below the median price, $280,000 in Littlestown, your taxes this year went up $148. That's a lot of money. So considering that, you know, Adams County hit pretty hard this year with a tax increase, and then this board's talking about doing the same, I don't think the residents of this district can afford this. And I also want to get into the fact that the water bills. Last July, the water went up 25%. So I heard a lot about the water bills. 25%. And then in January, it went up another 25%. So my big issue is with all these fees that these residents in this district are getting hit with, I don't think it's a very good time to be raising taxes on any of our residents in this district. I think that these residents need a huge break. I think they've taken a big hit, especially with the county tax at 16%, which is 0.7 mils raised. And you know, figure a $211,000 house is not even the median house in Littlestown. So I mean, I would suggest the board rethink these issues, these spending issues, everything they're trying to do. I would suggest you guys reconsider it, because to be honest with you, these residents are strapped. They're completely strapped, and they relayed that to me. And I know what they're going through. I see it, I hear it. I would appreciate the board if they would take that into consideration and in their deliberating process tonight. And I appreciate y'all letting me speak. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Presentation tonight is going to cover two kind of main topics. The first one is going to cover just the RFPs. We have several kind of out there within the district that are going to come in the next few months, which is kind of bringing up that FP&S meeting about what those RFPs, where they stand today, what's going to happen in the next 4 months, some information on those, and then we'll jump into budget discussions, what the budget looks like here, to work into the budget and having a presentation for the full board in April, and round out with the changes that the bills have in that timeline. So we'll jump into the presentation. So the first portion here we're going to cover is RFPs, or request for proposals. The first one we're going to focus on is the construction grant. So if you remember, the board approved back in December that we would do the scaled down version. This is the middle school, high school, so fusion, pneumatics in the lower level, and the 1990 windows portion of that is about 1.87 million for the blue gym, windows, and mattings, and 1.5 here for ACs for HVAC. So the portion I'm going to focus on here tonight is just the municipal high school portion. So we had a walkthrough with the engineers and architects on January 29th to review the scope of work. They could see the spaces because originally the lower level was getting limited scope of work. With this grant, we're now able to establish a larger scope of work, so they want to refresh their memory with that, update their drawings, look at the district's, I guess what we were anticipating scale of work to be done. They also followed up on that on the 14th when we had no students in some of the spaces, our classrooms. So they went in there on the 14th and followed up. We're anticipating them to have some back and forth between us, and Victor and I, for clarification on questions to have drawings and bid documents somehow prepared in the summer months. We're going to move through that here in the next spring, hopefully have something for summer. And that would align with our current project facing the current middle school, high school to align with some of those overlapping project spaces. To hopefully start work in the fall of 25 and continue through spring of 26. Some of that's going to be timing. Obviously, gym space is premium space, and we have to coordinate that accordingly with who's in the gym and when, and how we might manage that kind of best fit athletics that are less the least amount of disruption. So we're working through that. That's the initial anticipation. As you can see, the construction elements that's contingent on weather and timing and everything else. So this is just forethought of where we think things will end up. And then if that would all go to plan, we would then, once that was completed, we would then focus on the ACES portion of that project and replacing HVAC units. So that's just kind of the update on construction. We're working through that scope of work and hoping to get some additional information over the next couple months to have a packet sometime in the summer. Just any questions about the construction grant portion of it. We'll jump through the athletics. So on January 7th, we had a meeting with track and court with myself, Shelley Young, and Victor, discussed with the representative, and we had a very long discussion and very in-depth discussion about the spaces of athletics. I think one of the things that came to the surface level pretty quickly was the analysis of the reorientation of softball. As you remember, the FP&S committee opened that back up to looking at reorientation. The representative from Track and Court confirmed that with saying if there's ever a chance that the board in the future would like to expand or move the track in any means, then the softball decision now affects that. The track will only be able to stay as is if the softball stays as is. There's no real estate to move that elsewhere. So that's where you're saying that the recommendation is if we ever think at the district or the board that in the future track will want to either expand or change, that will, our decision today will affect that. So he's saying that would kind of the presentation package he's going to rally behind right now is the reorientation of softball. So we met with him, on February 7th, to do those layouts and designs and changes and options. I think for about 2 or so hours of that. He's supposed to have a packet for us to review to make sure he has all the changes we talked about here this month of March. And anticipation is to have him present those options to that FP&S committee on April 1st meeting. So you guys can select it if those options make it to an official bid document. Some of those questions or changes, we'll review that in April. Say FP&S committee is fine with that. The board, they can see the scope of work of what. And then from there, it will go out to bid, and then the board can approve bids when they come back in April. So that's the next step there with that. So we'll have a scope of work, and you'll have official presentation in April. And questions there for athletics.
when you say the decision we made tonight,
Not tonight, when we go
when
through.
you said what discussion we made tonight, you did say that.
So we'll clarify. So the decision you guys, the board will have to make, it says when he presents that packet, he's gonna present it in the fashion of reorientation, because an as-is, we all know what softball currently is. It's gonna be more of the same, just upgraded in that same fashion. The reorientation has to be visualized and see what that would look like. So that's what this packet's gonna be behind this. When we originally signed, he only creates one at a time. He can't create multiple scenarios a lot. Focus on that one. If the committee says we want to go back to as is, that's an easier task for him to go backwards than to create a reorientation after the fact.
So the reorientation is because of the traffic.
Correct. The proximity of the track in relation to the
But if we say as is, then anything in the future would just.
correct.
It limits our options in the future.
And that's where when I came back in January and I asked that basically that this is now the discussion we had with him. He said, you guys want to take that to the board because you're going to limit yourself severely if you don't. I said that you're correct. Let's pause for a month. Ask the committee. You guys said yes. Let's look at that. And now we're at this stage and we reconfirmed it. So we went through some more drawings, but yes, it would be very limited. You have no. So something else that came up with this is the scoreboard. He advised that that's not going to be part of this presentation. He advised that we look for a scoreboard individually because there's so many options for scoreboards. And we can create them to customize how the district wants. So we would work with the vendor if we wanted to go out RFP just specifically for a scoreboard and pick a vendor. We can do that and then we can customize those. He said to draw one, you're going to be working with the vendor directly anyhow. He said that's just not good utilization at this time.
And we don't pay the bill.
No, we wouldn't pay him that. We would just work directly with that.
I'm saying if we did it for him.
Yes. So that was his recommendation that we look at that and confirm that he's not going to have a scoreboard in that packet. So we'll let you know that.
So we have to define it.
Yeah, so he has some recommendations of people he's worked with in the past. We have not gone down that far until we see this packet and know who we want to work with as a district. He has some recommendations people we can ask in reference and follow that.
Already did scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna research that as part of the March time. Any other questions on that, folks? Okay, so then we'll go into transportation. Laura and myself worked on creating that draft. It's currently for in-house operations. We don't have a document to just refine. We have to create one more or less from scratch. So that was kind of our task. We created a draft and we reviewed some of that on February 20th. We made some changes and are currently conducting those changes for a final review in March, and then we would have a packet to review again in April. So April's going to be a lot of these RFPs in that April timeframe. So that's what that's going to be, and it's going to show us what the district, what we talked about before. We have fuel tanks, we have a lot, we have current busing, we have a lot of things that we are going to structure that benefit the district. And we just want to make sure the board also agrees with those assessments. Right now, that'll come back in April. It says this is the packet to advertise, and then hopefully we have an award in May. That timeline.
So are you the one that's deciding to put in there, like whether or not we keep our buses?
So Laura and myself will create that. The board has the ultimate decision to say what is in the bid documents. So we create them, and then you guys, or should say the board then says, we agree, we like this, we don't agree, we want to change, and then we change those documents, and that
Any vendors expect to keep all of the transportation off-site? Do you have options there that we can utilize some of the resources we have on campus to be able to, make it more.
We are looking down that avenue. That is something that we are anticipating. We are a law that will save transportation fees from drivers who are going to vendors' lot to then come to us. Travel time that we do. Potential saves are looking at that. Obviously, we have some wear and tear and utility use here, so we're looking at that's included. We charge the vendor for that.
And that's coming when, Tom?
That would be anticipation is to have that here for April 1st. Yes.
And you don't know anything about these things?
The vendor would maintain all the
So you
buses.
need part of the year to get in there.
Yes, we would not make any repair or maintenance of the buses that would be on the vendor.
So when you present this, though, so you're gonna present to us cost savings by doing this, or?
We will not know cost savings until we got vendor proposals back. So we cannot get any cost savings until they would say, it's this amount of money. Once we go out to bid, there's that information.
So if we take the RFP and we review that as a board in April 1st, and then we take it to the regular board meeting for full board approval to say yes or no, if it's recommended by FP&S, how soon would we see those proposals from potential vendors?
So the board would approve it at the April voting session to advertise the following day. That week we would advertise. We need to advertise in 2 papers for 3 weeks. So at minimum we have up 3 weeks. And then after that we can have a meeting scheduled to review those proposals. There's a lot of times there's references you call and some